Basu Godin Notebook. 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 Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Basu and Godin Notebook on Monday, November 24th. I almost got that date wrong, Arpin. That's
I
okay.
almost got the day of the week wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. When's our last Tuesday episode? It's been a while. Anyway.
Yeah, we don't do Tuesdays anymore, but
I
yeah,
know.
this week would have been a good opportunity. But anyhow, it's Monday. Confirmed.
Yes, it's Monday, absolutely. And I feel as though, and it's been mentioned in our chat by one of our regular listeners, but it feels as though it's been a while since we've started a podcast. A couple of days after a win, because this team has been
been 2
struggling
weeks.
so much. Yeah,
It's been 2 weeks since they beat the Mammoth, and now they're going to play the Mammoth on Wednesday.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
like a good bookend. It's a good bookend here, because if there's one thing that we should have learned from the Mammoth game, is that one win on a Saturday night does not necessarily mean everything is fine. So
no, and I mean, in both cases, you could think that, oh, this is the right brand of hockey. This is the
it's a
way
statement
that
win.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well,
but it wasn't.
I'll tell you what.
It wasn't against Utah.
No, it wasn't. And the statement game, part of how well it went on Saturday is also how messed up the Maple Leafs are right now. Injured?
Yeah, it's a huge part of it. Yes, of course.
Injured, but messed up too. It's it's a struggling team right now. But you know what? I'm not going to piss on anybody's parade right now, because the Canadiens needed that win, and they did what they had to do in order to get that win. We've been talking a lot in the previous episode about the goalies, and I felt as though, even though Jakub Dobeš looked nervous and shaky at times, it really looked as though the group in front of him said, let's get this game, and let's make sure that we get the W out of that one, because it felt as a collective win with a lot of guys putting the effort in.
Well, the reality of this game on Saturday against the Leafs, and the difference in this game than the one against Utah, the game against Utah, if you recall, back then the overwhelming narrative was like, oh, here's the ascending, emerging teams in both conferences, similarly constructed, similar young talent. This is maybe a future Stanley Cup final preview 2-3 years down the road. Who knows? Like it's these are two teams. The Spider-Man meme was kind of a thing that weekend. In this case, obviously, this couldn't be further from the truth in terms of Montreal and Toronto. This is a team struggling to keep a window open, and another team struggling to open one, hopefully for the next several years, obviously. But the similarity between the two teams Saturday is that they were both wounded animals, right? They were both smarting. Pressure in their respective markets was through the roof. The goaltending had gone completely south for both of them. Injuries, both of them having multiple injuries. The Leafs arguably having, I guess, more significant ones than the Canadiens, but the Canadiens have significant injuries. They're missing a good amount of important players to them. So who is going to be the wounded animal that got up and attacked instead of remaining wounded and absorbing a blow? And that team was the Canadiens.
As soon as they scored their first goal, it seemed
it was over.
It was over.
In the Leafs' body language, in the way that they approached the game after that first goal, and definitely after the second goal, and the way in which the Canadiens scored them, like kind of dazzling skill plays. That pass from Suzuki to Hudson was incredible, and Berube deciding not to challenge when Gallagher was kind of spun into the crease, but definitely made contact with Joseph Woll and definitely impeded his ability to make that save. That was a curious decision, and maybe considering the fragility of his own team, maybe that's a risk that I would have taken if I were him. But in any case, and considering it was Brendan Gallagher doing the contact, that ups your chances of success as an opposing coach trying to challenge a goaltender interference call.
Yeah.
But the important thing is, and Marty mentioned it today after practice, that he liked the way in which his team won more than the fact that they actually won. And I think this is what he's referring to, is that the Canadiens decided that enough was enough, and the Maple Leafs did not make the same decision. They did not behave as if enough was enough. They behaved as if this can continue in a sense. And so, and Saturday morning, I think Marty was pretty, he was starting to get a little exasperated, and it didn't come out until after the game. But, when we covered practice on Friday, remember that Marty came and spoke to us. There was an 8-minute limit on his availability. It was exactly 8 minutes. Then they went in and there was a meeting,
Yep.
and we stayed right there. Like, we didn't leave that area just outside the dressing room. Like, we were a door away from the actual room. And so apparently that meeting was blunt, and there was a lot of video shown, and there was a lot of things said, and there was a lot of honesty to it. And in retrospect, you go back to hear what Lane Hudson said after that day on Friday, so immediately after that meeting, but without revealing that we've just had this really. And he just said, Marty could be screaming and shouting, but he's not doing that. He's explaining to us with honesty what we have to do, but he's doing it in a way that we all respect, and it makes us want to win for him because he pours so much into this, and we want to reward that. That's slightly paraphrasing what he said, but it turns out that day, that meeting, resonated with guys to the point that Mike Matheson talked about it after the game Saturday. Josh Anderson talked about it after the game Saturday, and it was so. As I wrote in my notebook this morning on The Athletic, but it's funny that back-to-back years, a game against the Washington Capitals around this time of year leads to a punitive bag skate a year ago, and this year leads to maybe not punitive, but a blunt, direct
Look yourself in the mirror session.
a look yourself in the mirror session as a team meeting based on how the team performed against the Washington Capitals 2 years in a row. So let's see. I mean, the obviously the first blush of it against Toronto was encouraging, but again, the Canadiens still have a burden of proof where they have to show that that's not a one-off, that was not and they have a very, very difficult test ahead of them. Wednesday night in Utah, Friday afternoon in Colorado, and in Vegas, and then Saturday afternoon in Colorado. And Colorado obviously is the best team in the league, and it's not particularly close at this point. And the two other opponents are not easy either. And that trip has become the new. Our buddy Corey Masisak had an interesting take in the Denver Post, and he did a story on it. How that trip, 3 and 4 in Utah, Vegas, and Colorado, in whatever order you do it, is now the equivalent of what used to be a death knell of going to California and playing 3 games in 4 nights against those 3 teams. This is the hardest trip in the league now. This Utah, Colorado, Denver run, often in 3 games and 4 nights, often grouped together, and the Canadiens are now going on it. And so it's a big test for them, and it starts an even bigger test for them, which is just an insanely compact schedule between now and Christmas. And so we'll see how this first leg goes.
But what's encouraging is that game on Saturday, and you can list the mitigating factors all you want, but it looked as though it came from a team who had found some degree of confidence, and the way by which they were connecting on their passes, that they were getting into a groove, that they were limiting their mistakes, that they brought their physicality in the game. There are all sorts of elements that, if you're looking for a performance that will enable you to, it will give you a shot in the arm prior to a difficult trip like that. Honestly, it remains one game, but as far as one game performances go, this was very encouraging for the mojo of that team. So it's in that sense, I mean, it would have been better if the Canadiens had figured things out earlier than that. It's just one game before that trip. but it's at least they won that game decisively, and I saw on the ice a team that looked like what it's meant to look like a lot more.
Yes, and and they're on a plane right now, and that plane ride, today's practice, that plane ride would have been a lot less pleasant, obviously, if had they lost to
Man,
that version of the Maple Leafs. Like that would have
yeah,
been a very consequential. This would have been a very long 3 days in between games, and the pressure on them on this trip would be that much higher. But it's still high, I think. The one thing about that, though, the mojo and all these things, like it really comes down to something that is the exact same issue as was the case in Washington on Halloween a year ago, which is turning pucks over in the neutral zone, cross ice passes, hitting pads, hitting sticks, chipping pucks in and not getting it deep, like things like that. And Marty was talking about it Saturday morning, and I'm not going to share exactly what he said, but I went up to him after the press conference. I'm like, when you talk about turnovers in the neutral zone, are you talking about the rink wide stuff, or? And he's just like, I'm talking about everything, and he went on to explain numerous examples of what he's talking about. And he kept saying, and all these buzzwords kept coming up. And he was like, he was clearly frustrated by it because it's the exact same thing as 13 months ago, as he said after the Washington game. It's the same thing. At the end, I was like, "Do you ever feel like do you ever feel like a broken record?" And he just kind of walked. He's like, "Yes." He walked off. It's like, but that's what's so frustrating to him is that yes, like look at the mojo that you saw on Saturday came from the most basic place imaginable, which is don't turn the puck over in the neutral zone. That's all it is. It's
yeah,
that simple. And from that, so many things come as a result of that. And it's funny, like after that conversation, the first shift of that game Saturday, Nick Suzuki had the puck in the neutral zone. He tried to chip it in. It hit a Leafs player's skate and didn't get deep. And I'm thinking, I'm watching that and I'm just like, oh, a penny for Marty's thoughts right now, because it's like it's the kind of detail that you can't have happen. You need to make sure in those situations. And I think that's what a lot of the message that he sent to the team, I think, was that your intentions can be good, but this isn't about execution as much as it is about urgency, and that this is something that you need. These are little things that you need to make sure happen. If you're going to chip a puck into the zone,
yeah.
make sure it gets into the zone. There's some obstacles in the way, sure, but don't take it for granted. Don't be casual about it. Treat it with the importance it deserves. And you wouldn't just kind of casually take a one timer with a wide open net in front of you. Well, treat chipping a puck in with the same level of importance as you would that situation. And I think that's the main thing that changed on Saturday, is that those details in the Canadiens game, the importance of them, and not taking them for granted or as a given that you're going to be able to chip a puck in. I think that message hit home, and that I don't know what was said in that meeting, but I would have to imagine this was a big part of it.